Hello, everyone, and welcome to another series of Foundry virtual events. I'm super happy you guys tuned in, and I hope everyone is doing well. I'm here today with my colleagues Dan, Head of Research, Matt, Director of Product at Foundry, Maddie, PR and Comms Manager here at Foundry, and myself, Field Marketing Manager here at Foundry. Before I dive into some of the insights and also into the panel, I wanted to share a few updates with you guys. Firstly, we have 17 on-demand webinars available now on our website. So please have a look at our event section whenever you have a chance. If you have any questions or you want to participate in Foundry virtual events, you can send us an email on virtual.events@foundry.com. We also have quite a busy schedule coming up as well, so make sure you tune in. We've got the webinar on Master Skin Project with Mari on June 11th. We've got modeling for VFX today with Modo on June 16th. We've got Nuke Learnings with our very own Steve Wright on June 18th. And then we've got a replay again on becoming a senior compositor with Courtney Price as well. So please make sure you tune into those. Keep up to date with industry trends and information from Foundry as well by following us on social media and as well as joining our Insights Hub as well and our quarterly newsletter. Speaking of Insights Hub, we also have some incredible articles there as well. So one of them being Project Iced, bringing the beauty of choice beyond media and entertainment. So please have a look at our Insights Hub whenever you have a chance. We've got plenty of content there, training material there as well, and also material on each of our products. Lastly, I also just want to do a shout out to all of our industry partners, Axis VFX, ASWF, ACM SIGGRAPH, and VES. So thank you so much to our industry partners. If you're not supporting them already, please make sure you do so. We also are hiring as well. So these are a couple of the roles that are currently open here at Foundry. So these are within the VFX engineering skills. So we're looking for lead and senior research engineers, software engineers, and also principal software engineers as well. So for more information, you can have a look at our foundry.com/careers page. Lastly, I just want to do a massive shout out to all of our speakers, studios, clients who have participated in Foundry virtual events so far. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for sharing everything, especially during this difficult time as well. Especially, I also wanted to do a thank you to Marco from Happy Finish, Hitesh from BOT VFX, and as well as Angus from Preymaker. So thank you so much for joining us for today as well. And I hope you'll enjoy today's panel. And that's it for me today. And I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Dan. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. So hi, I'm Dan Ring. I'm Head of Research here at Foundry. And in my role, I get to look into my crystal ball and try to figure out what workflows of the future can be enabled if we solve some hard problems today. And I'm delighted to have a panel of industry visionaries joining us today to share their experience and knowledge and to help us predict and picture what the future of visual effects is and what technologies are going to get us there. So firstly, please welcome Hitesh Shah, CEO of BOT VFX. And Hitesh, would you mind telling us a bit about yourself and BOT VFX, please?
Sure, yeah. BOT has been around for a dozen years, 12 years. We support pretty much most of the major players and mid-level players in the industry. We serve other visual effects houses, and often we serve production houses directly. And by the way, this is not the real me. This is just a deep fake you're looking at.
Brilliant. Thanks, deepfake Hitesh. Next up, we have Marco Marchesi, CTO of Happy Finish. So Marco, likewise, would you mind telling us a bit about yourself and Happy Finish, please?
Yeah, hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm a CTO of Happy Finish. We work on the intersection between creativity and technology. In the last, let's say, 4 years, we deliver more than 400 projects on VR, augmented reality, machine learning, VFX, CG, all possible toys and technologies that are related to interactivity and immersivity. I think we were there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Marco. We also have Angus Neil joining us, who's the Chief Creative at Preymaker. Angus is running a bit late, but will join us shortly. So I'm going to introduce him now, so there's no surprises. So Angus was one of the key driving forces behind building The Mill, where he was Chief Creative Officer. So he's a passionate technologist. He helped grow and engage in concept to delivery creative partnerships for film, advertising, VR, AR, experiential and immersive experiences. Angus is particularly focused on driving innovation and creating breakthrough IP. So a key example of this being the awesome Blackbird technology that the mill had built, which is an ingenious system for automotive production. More recently, Angus has been working on an entirely cloud-based creative environment for Preymaker, which is focusing on innovation, collaboration, and execution. And finally, also, we have our onstage Matt Mazzaro, our director of product for new technology, who's going to help set the stage for us, follow the chat for questions, and help keep us on task. So, Matt, please take it away.
Yeah, hi everyone. First of all, thank you all for joining us here. Foundry R&D is, our efforts in Foundry R&D are really focused on areas where there's a really brisk pace of innovation and where the impact on our trade is increasing very rapidly. Areas like machine learning, real-time, and cloud are, these are the areas where we're really concentrating on our R&D efforts. But one of the things that really makes our efforts work is engagement with the industry and with customers. To really build the future, it's something that is really done from the grassroots and through everyone's imagination being joined with practical application, both in studio and with vendors like Foundry. And we're really keen to be here with these great panelists to talk about how these big trends are going to impact the way that we work in the future. So we're going to cover those three areas. We're going to start with talking about machine learning. We're going to have a discussion about real time, and we'll finish with a section on cloud. We'll have some Q&A at the end. But this is an interactive panel, so feel free to ask questions and dive in the question section. And we'll be taking your questions as we go along. And if there's anything that we don't get to, we'll try to get to it at the end in the Q&A. So without any further delay, let's jump into our first area. Let's talk about machine learning and the promise that machine learning holds. It's a very interesting area where there's a lot of capability in machine learning to provide answers to difficult or impossible tasks in computer graphics that have been very kind of intractable before. But there's also a lot of serious questions that come up with machine learning. Questions around accessibility, questions around ethics, who owns the generative content or the content that's input into the model, or even the model itself, and questions around job security. Is machine learning a force for making people more productive, or is it a force for putting people out of work? It's a very controversial question. So our question to panelists is, where do you, Etosha and Marcos, where do you see the most value for machine learning in visual effects? How will it have the biggest impact in the future? And how do we get around these thorny issues around accessibility and legality and ethics?
I will say, from my experience, for sure, VFX and machine learning, the big potential and the immediate wedding is where with photorealism. So basically, one of the big achievement that we saw recently in machine learning, and let's specifically talk about the generative adversarial networks is the fact that you can achieve high photorealistic assets and visually. And this one, of course, is pretty interesting for all the VFX industry, because if we need so far to have a team of CG artists able to replicate some visual effect, now we can try to train a system to do that instead. Of course, the automation, it doesn't mean they were gonna remove all the jobs. It's something that people constantly ask me. I always constantly talk about the comparison that there are in centuries. I don't know, Charles Baudelaire says about photography is gonna kill painting, because people are not gonna paint anymore, because now it's photography. And after a couple of centuries, they are still both there. So the same is going to happen with machine learning and traditional VFX. It's more about people are going to use machine learning as a new tool to improve the VFX pipeline. It's definitely is not going to remove all the possible tasks, because still the human eye is needed to make art. It's not something that you can replace easily.
Yeah, I think, as Marco was saying, any relatively new technology has so much misconception built into it. So much of the public has a naive perspective of it. I mean, if you think back to, I know Marco gave an example, if you think back to the early days of Pixar coming out with their movies, people were pretty convinced, okay, this is the end of real human actors, and we're going to have thespians that are completely computer generated. We all know that's not only not realistic then, but it's real actors have long-term job security, because there is definitely an art that can't be replicated. So every new technology, not that machine learning is that new, but every new technology has this misconception period where it's known more by either the buzzwords or the key poster child examples like deep fakes, and everyone talks about it as if that is the big innovation. But I think I look at it more pragmatically, that it is really an enabling technology that in some areas will basically surprise the heck out of us in terms of how well it works. In other areas where we thought with broad strokes, it doesn't quite materialize that way. And so we have to oftentimes, when I look at where can we apply what machine learning has to offer to the various problems, many of the problems come into this category called human in the middle. How do we enable algorithms that facilitate an artist to do their job easier? Not just from a ethical or humanitarian perspective, but just from the recognizing that there is a craft here, there's creativity involved, and if it could ever be achieved by pressing a button, we would have been in a different place a long time ago. So many of the places where we can make these advancements are in these subtle tipping points, right? In these places where, okay, can you effectively do image segmentation? Can you effectively 3D solve a camera situation so you don't have to manually do most of the work? Can you do, as Marco was saying, can you generate, given an A and a B, can you generate a hybrid that is much, what seems like a very self-creative process, but it's actually has elements of it that are trainable. So when you look at that, and when you look at what has to go into machine learning for a model to be successful, it's a lot of training data, which means we can't just start with a blank canvas. We've got to say, what is the canvas of data that we have to feed it? What is a set of thousands of decisions that artists are making that we can feed into the training set to yield something meaningful on the other side? So much of the time is in formulating the right problem, identifying where we can actually make headway, and avoiding sort of the fantastical. But it still raises issues on, yes, it's going to reduce the amount of work that in the end artists may do, but it may redeploy their skills to more focus on essential stuff. And that's always the hope, is how do we reorient the work, not how do we eliminate an artist's work.
Yeah, you've touched on a couple of things that are kind of core to our heart at Foundry, and particularly the idea of removing the drudge work. So taking the work that's sort of more manual and tedious things, and getting it to be more creative as soon as possible. And I think the key here is and also you mentioned about formulating the problem and coming up with what is the problem that you're trying to solve seems to be the really crux of the issue. So do you have any sense on how we get to that point, and how we move from this being sort of a data in, so a bunch of data in, which gives you an answer in the ballpark of something that you've already seen, to creating the next generation of tools and experiences for artists?
I would say particularly if you can put that machine learning algorithm in various forms, various algorithms, to do what we do today, perhaps in a much more efficient way. And that requires really clever design, because you're having to still understand a human interface and how humans still want to approach it, and meld in a component which aggregates the thousands of decisions made by artists in a certain way, and effectively make and enable them at the time of consumption. So to give an example, we've been trying to solve at least parts of this problem of image segmentation. I don't think we've even come close to beginning to solve it. But one of the things that happens is, if you just say, hey, I'm just going to solve image segmentation, and you try to discover an algorithm, if it gets you 99% of the way there, it's still not quite usable in our context, because to fix that 1%, you cannot use the data that was generated. So the analogy is, any VFX artist would know, if I give you a slap comp, just to give you a concept of what has to be done, and that's a 5-man day job, and I tell the artist, since I'm giving you the slap comp, I'm going to shave 1 day off, because look, I've already done the work. They'll laugh at you, because that slap comp served a different purpose. It's not reusable in any way. So that bridge from going from something that gets you close to there to actually finishing the job, that has to be crossed effectively. And that's where the human in the middle model is, where you have to reorient your problem statement to be, how do I get it to a place? How do I identify splines as an example of image segmentation, not just a roster edge, right? This is just a particular problem that we've been trying to get at. Those kinds of things, because if you can generate a spline, now an artist can manipulate it and alter it the way, she sees it coming to the end, as opposed to, here's the roster image, now you can't do much more with it. So it's effective integration into a tool is really key to the success.
Excellent. Yeah, I fully agree, and I particularly on the Roto example, when we've been trying to crack Roto for years.
I think VFX is kind of the picky part of the creative industry in that, because of course they need really high-end quality. Because, for example, if you imagine retail or games, there is much space for integrating this technology. Actually, for example, NVIDIA is already using upscaling super resolution into the real-time ray tracing as well, because of course it's something that in a bigger scale on animated sequence is not something really visible, like in a still. We work a lot on stills in the company, so we know that the details that you need to have guarantee on a still is completely different of the details that you need on animated video, animated sequence, where you don't really care about every single pixel.
Yeah.
Because there is always motion blur they save.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
And so Marco, like feeding on from that, what do you reckon are the kind of the hard challenges in machine learning at the moment?
Definitely, scale is still a big problem. So scale in terms of having the quality that we need. Also the artifact. I mean, you can really think. I talk about that because I'm really keen because on image generation, I was for example, we introduced a technique that was used by DeepMind and NVIDIA, the truncation trick. So we're really kind of expert on that area, and that technique was used for removing the artifact. The artifact are still as Hitesh says, that we can achieve the 99%, but that 1% of artifact is basically prevent you to use what you generate. So the big challenge is to remove that artifact and train a machine to make it right. One challenge, for example, that is really easy is these systems are not able yet to draw a triangle, a clean triangle, if you ask to do that. They are so complex in the middle in terms of internal parameters, they are not able to understand how to replicate something so simple for a human brain. And because a probabilistic approach are like, they have this limitation. It's not easy. You need to basically work in a more traditional way, like vectors and all this stuff to do that. So there are a lot of information that you are not able to reproduce, like signals, license plate. You cannot generate license plate easily from scratch, because all these things, they are made as an artifact. So it's a big problem when you want to generate photorealistic images.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. I've noticed that Angus has joined us.
Hello.
Angus, good to have you aboard.
Sorry I was late, guys.
Not at all. Not at all. So we were just talking about machine learning, and I wondered if you, like, the last question I asked Marco was around the challenges in machine learning. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on like the kind of the value and also the hurdles that machine learning is facing at the moment.
You know, I think machine learning is one of those things that it's used in the right way, it can really help the creation of images, and specifically really try and help the organic nature and simulate the organic nature of things, especially when you start using it with regards to applying to animation and things like that. Like when working with digital humans, as everyone knows, is incredibly hard. But then trying to actually animate all those little nuances in a digital human, you know, by hand is arduous. And then trying to just use motion capture where you're just applying everything, you get a bit of an uncanny valley feeling. So using machine learning in order to be able to look at the little pauses, the little nuances and eyes, the way those little things, those little animation things, is a good example in terms of, you know, how it can be used kind of really creatively in order to improve something and take vast amount of time. With regards to 2D kind of image manipulation, you know, there's amazing kind of work being done by companies like Topaz Labs with all the gigapixel kind of upraising software. It's like CSI quality stuff. It's like when I used to remember watching CSI and going, you can't zoom in on an image and create detail where there's no detail. It doesn't work. But for some reason, this company's been able to do this. I still don't know how they're doing it, but they're saying it's machine learning. So, you know, I've also been working in kind of doing facial replacements, and that's been an arduous task in terms of the deep fake stuff. And you get like 85% of the way there, and then that last 15%, it falls apart. And when you get into that situation, it's really hard to fix that bit that falls apart. So it's this thing, you're either all in or you're not, from my experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what Hitesh mentioned earlier. Yeah.
What Angus just mentioned, Marco mentioned before, I think I mentioned in the same analogy as what I term the last mile problem with some of the machine learning problem sets. It's you get there, but now how do you make it usable in our context? In our context, the context is everything, right? People talk about, hey, you can build a driverless car if it can understand the world. Why can't we do that? Well, the simple reason is you just need to know that there's a car in front. You don't need to have a precision on the exact pixel of where the car is and what type of car it is. And so it's easy to sort of gloss over some of those details to say, in our case, the output has to be pixel precise or reasonably so. And if it is not, it has to be malleable so that a human can take over from there. And that last mile still, it's like the new chasm that we have to cross.
Yes, exactly.
What's dangerous though is when people start seeing the kind of a best case scenario demonstration of machine learning put up on YouTube, and then that goes around the world, and people go, oh my goodness, we can just film any actor we want and change his face by giving it a couple of still images. They go and sell it off to a client, and then the client comes back and goes, great, bought. And then people are like, hey, I saw this bit of software on the internet, you can just use this. But it's obviously you can't use it for production. It's really, really clever PhD stuff that's been written kind of in labs. But when you get into kind of creative lighting scenarios and get to field and pull in focus and not flat lighting, it just falls apart. So, applying that type of thinking into a production pipeline and actually kind of really going, okay, well, when it comes off the rails, I'll intervene, allow me to kind of like then take the reins and finish the task, is almost essential in using machine learning. So it's kind of like you help the machine figure it out when it messes up, is the only way I can see it really working in the future.
One problem of research project is basically most of the time they are being made on top of some existing data set or some specific context. Of course, they cannot generalize. I'm so sorry for saying that, piss off, because there are so many posts on LinkedIn, I see on social media about new people sharing new results, and actually what you see is actually the results of the training. So it's basically, they show, also the paper, they show what the machine saw many times. It's not actually a real new result that actually, so it's kind of, they are cheating in terms of like to show at all costs new things that actually are not achievable. And you demonstrate that every time, because you try to apply to a new data set is actually a completely bad result. And people say, why is not working on my data? Why is not working on
Exactly, yeah. Exactly.
It's really early stage on that, for sure. There are a long way to go.
Yeah.
This is really great, guys. I'm actually going to shift us to our next topic, which is real time. I think it's really awesome because we're talking a little bit about sort of the expectations that are set by some of these sort of early applications, but in very specialized forms of technology. And I think, real time is no exception. We've all seen the incredible quality generated by games and game engines. Unreal Engine has caused a huge buzz. Unity is being used by a huge number of people that would never have previously had access to a tool as powerful as a commercial game engine. And there's this sense that the realism that is emitted from game engines and the kind of tangible interactivity is just growing by leaps and bounds. And we're at a phase now where it seems to be making real inroads into production. We've all seen kind of virtual production kind of take off, and we're seeing in-camera compositing. And I think one of the questions is we're quite curious about is, how does this technology that sort of kind of birthed largely in the game creation world, how does that translate into something more general for creatives across the whole spectrum of narrative content and different types of hybrid experiences? How do we actually put this to work? Will we see game engines evolving to become more content creation tools? Do we see content creation tools looking like game engines? Do we need to create something completely new to really bring all of this promise to bear and to get it into the hands of people who actually use it on a day-to-day basis? So how is real time going to have a real kind of tangible impact on the artists today outside of game creation?
Personally, I think it's going to be probably one of the biggest revolutions we've seen in the creation of visual effects, CGI, and that. I think that the speed of iteration and also just the environment that you work in, it's a completely different way of thinking. I've been in the industry for a long time, and I remember kind of using Alias Wavefront, and before that TDI Explorer. I don't know if you guys even remember that. And it was really hard to get something looking good. You had to cheat. You had to kind of cheat to look at the real world. Like, how do I make this feel real? And in game engines, we're in that position right now where we're so used to kind of all the expensive tools that these beautiful high-end renderers that you just hit a button and it automatically calculates everything that you need. But in game engines, if you want to get that speed, you have to cheat. So it's bringing all that old thinking back again. But it's inevitable. The rate of development that's coming out of NVIDIA, that's coming out of AMD, that we're seeing kind of year on year, there's no doubt about it that the quality, those expensive buttons are going to turn up at some stage. And what I find funny is that it's an offshoot. Like we're not the intended kind of users for these game engines. Like these game engines are designed for games. But here we are kind of going, hang on, this is an amazing tool or visual effects or CGI or creation. So I think that we need to work closely with these people that make it and then kind of help inform what needs to be created next in order to help us use it.
Exactly. I think, Marco, you're heavily embedded in the real-time world.
Yeah.
What's your take?
My artists, my team love real time for sure. I mean, it's been the holy grail in terms of VFX and CG for years since the, let's say, the ray tracing formulation, you know, when it was so difficult. Okay, but it's definitely what everyone wants. And actually, it's funny because I think in some way, one of the rare cases where it can arrive overnight. So people realize, oh, wow, this NVIDIA card, they really do real-time ray tracing. And they were not really prepared to do that. It's actually, many people said that they actually, NVIDIA like jump like 5 years ahead on that because actually people were waiting. We were expecting like in a few years, not like immediate like NVIDIA release. So definitely real-time is changing everything because it's basically asking and urging people to understand the other tools. So now all CG artists, they are thinking, oh, wow, Unreal is pretty good. It's actually, we should learn that. And also at the same time, they see the potential for other, like say, primarily developers or technical artists to join more in terms of like, okay, I think I need to raise the bar in terms of quality of the assets that I do because I can do all the tools that I'm already using. So it's cool for everyone because basically we are raising the bar in terms of quality, creativity. People can really create things at no cost, and no cost is for real because now that we have a quick sell acquired by Epic Games, for example, we have really high standard assets for free. It's a completely, as Angus said, it's a revolution. It's a revolution.
Exactly. Yeah, I think like Angus's what Angus said about like it's a different way of thinking. I think is very true. I mean, like, are there any particular ways that you think like that is that the thinking has shifted? Like so, like you said, the advent from say switching on the RTX button and seeing this new thing. Like how does that affect artist workflows?
Well, to me, it's kind of it's kind of like taking an on-set experience. You know, when you're on a film shoot and you've got really great kind of professionals around, you've got a great DP, you've got a great kind of director, you've got a great gaffer, lighting person, and everybody's working in collaboration, moving the lights, setting up the shots, changing the focal length, changing the lens, and you're in a very creative moment. But it's because you're able to see things in real time. And that is now, I'm feeling that in game engines. Now when kind of working in game engines and you're able to move a light or you're able to change a lens and change the depth of field and you're seeing that instantaneously, it's a buzz. I can't think of any way of saying it. It's way more fulfilling because you can show someone, say, what do you think? Not kind of come back in a day and I'll show you a single frame. It's like, what do you think? No, let's move back a little bit. No, let's like move the light around a little bit more. It's very interactive and very creative. So I think the quality of what gets created is actually just going to go up because people are more engaged and people don't get bored. It's because there's something happening all the time.
Yeah, can I say that is so beautiful also to watch artists now working on that because it's like esports, but with CG. Before that, okay, we're gonna render. How long does it take? 2 days. Okay, we'll see you in a couple of days. Now,
I think
it's something really and nice to see.
I think coffee consumption has gone down ever since real-time stuff has taken on. People don't take as many coffee breaks.
It's true.
But I think that I'll just reiterate Angus's point is there's something transformational in terms of the craft you bring to the table when that decision cycle is much shorter. So, and we are less consumers of that, but even in the few places, I mean, the world, a lot of the software has become much more procedurally focused, and now you layer on the real time to it. There is a way in which the artist can do things differently and better than they could do before just because of that shorter decision cycle.
there's something amazing as well about the fact that somebody can learn real time, learn game engine, and then what they create doesn't just apply to rendered images. You know, they can then pivot their careers and go, you know, I'm going to start kind of working exclusively in AR, augmented reality. It's the same tool set. And then, I might actually go into gaming. So to me, it gives artists and practitioners more avenues of opportunity. So, because I think we're just scratching the surface in the areas where real-time game engines are going to be used. I think they're going to be used everywhere. And I think that if somebody learns Unity or Unreal Game Engine, they're going to be in a job for a long time, because there is so much opportunity there.
Can I also, because just connect to Angus' consideration about the questions that we are receiving. For a young generation, guys, it's the opportunity are huge, because now you have free tools that are so powerful that you can create basically everything. You have no idea how I was, I don't know, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, try to start something. This career, it's completely different. So don't be scared about that. Don't be scared about the jobs, position, the role. Just be open, curious. The tools are gonna change constantly. It's not a problem. It's just the creativity that is important. Is the key thing that human will keep. The other part is really irrelevant. So don't worry too much. It's really something they are always keen to repeat, because I think it's really keen to have kind of
it's true. In the early days of doing CGI in 3D, it was like trying to play a piano with a hammer. It was really kind of, you had to be very careful, and you could only play one thing at a time. And then Unreal and game engine, to me, it feels like you can finally use all your fingers. It's like finally you can actually kind of go and do something. And yeah, it's a new analogy. I've never used that one before.
Yeah, I think you're right that this kind of like creativity, you can never rival that. That's always the driving factor. And I think there is this nice convergence, I think, towards, and Angus, you mentioned it, of kind of the technology being one thing, and that's like the tool is one thing, but being used in different areas and being explored to things. So I think it's lovely that the way hearing that, like, people who used to work on video games are now being brought on set to bring movies to life, like on, like, you know, elaborate virtual production stages. I think it's incredibly transformative. But I'm keen to get your thoughts on, so like the experience, the immediate experience of working in real time is gorgeous and unparalleled. But like, what do you think needs to happen to get it to the next level? So like, this panel is all about like sort of disruption and driving forces. What's the next thing that has to happen in order to bring real time to a wider audience, and also, I suppose, address the questions on how do you get started, and what's the best avenue and inroads?
Well, I'll start from a kind of content creation and CGI perspective. You know, a lot of sometimes what makes stuff look really good is compositing. And sometimes in early days of kind of making CGI look great, you know, you just put it through a compositor, and that's why flame artists used to get paid so much money. It's because they were able to take kind of rudimentary 3D, you know, kind of add little tricks here and there, and make it look awesome. I feel like, I think there could be more kind of those types of, I don't know if the right terminology, but like 2D processes essentially, that allows you to kind of manipulate the imagery in real time, but as layers rather than as an entire scene. I feel like, especially when you're compositing multiple layers together, if you've got multiple camera feeds that you want to combine together, and you want to kind of use the environment maps, and so I think there's more that probably needs to be done on the Epic side there, but I don't think there should be anything holding anyone back right now. There's workarounds for a lot of things.
Kind of a side question related to this. How do you think then we get people who are like entrenched in ways of working, so say directors or DPs, and like in their own creative world? How do we expose those folks to this wider real-time experience that we're all enjoying?
It's Marco. No, I mean, No, I think no. It's just what I can say. I think is they're already exposed. I think is more a generation that they need to adapt to. I'm not really like now. I see the new generation people that we work collaborate already pretty super keen. They work on Unreal, for example, directors and director of photography already. So I think is as usual is kind of generation that they need to adapt to the new tools.
Yeah, I think it's inspiration. I feel like it's like when I watched the release of the Unreal 5 video, you know, a handful of my closest friends sent it to me, and within 5-10 minutes, my jaw was on the floor. I was so inspired. You know, like I've been in this business for so long, and if young people see that, or if people that are in this business that go, no, I kind of like the old way, it's kind of like, well, then the future's not for them. It's kind of like you've got to be excited about it. And I think the people that are excited about it and see the kind of opportunity are the ones that are really going to be kind of running to the front. Because to me, it's like night and day. It's like the first time I saw Google Earth, it was that, wow, that's crazy. Like you just this sense of awe and wonder. And that's what I feel now when I see the leaps that are happening in game engines. So I feel like inspiration is what people need.
Yeah.
But personally, on creativity and technology, I always inspired. We are kind of lucky because the progress, it makes people still excited even if they are working, I don't know, 30, 40 years in that technology. I watched last Sunday, I watched again Toy Story, 25 years old. Actually, honestly, I tell you, it looks terrible now, technically, of course. But it's a great story. It's one of the best animation ever. But of course, if you cannot compare because the rendering there was so pioneering, so cutting edge, but 25 years ago. So where I think every year there is something better on that side. Of course, story is another story, but really the storytelling, but the technical achievement, they make us everyone constantly excited. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, I remember when that was released, when Toy Story came out, it was at the time, it was, again, one of those moments like, this is amazing, this is phenomenal, this is incredible. And that was so inspiring. And it's only now with hindsight, you look back and you're like, wow, things have come a long way. So, but it's those landmark things that happen that really make everyone kind of, you know, sit up. It's the Jurassic Park, it's the Terminator 2, it's those key moments in time that you kind of, that make everyone kind of like, it's like a landmark, a flag in the ground for me, that I think. And it's those as long as there are those flags, those markers, people go towards them.
You know, I think we focused on the game engines, but one of the underlying components is obviously the NVIDIA graphics chips and stuff. I'd be curious to know, given, you know, will NVIDIA keep its edge? And obviously its consumption in AI has helped NVIDIA grow, but now with the geopolitical dynamics, China wanting to kind of go its own way to make sure there's not dependency, do you see that changing? Because that's a key ingredient in the whole equation, right? Is the growth in that real-time stuff does depend on that hardware, and there are very few companies that really know what they're doing in that space.
Well, I think AMD are pretty powerful. I think the fact that the next generation chip in PlayStation 5 is an AMD chip is, you know, they're definitely competition. And if you look at what AMD have been doing with the Epics and the Ryzen chipsets, they're kicking Intel's ass right now. Sorry, I'm not allowed to say that, but they're leading they're really kind of leading the charge. So I feel like there's some healthy competition there. Yes, they're both American companies, but the rest of the pack, in my mind, is quite far behind. I don't know, Dan, what do you think?
I mean, from our position, we've seen some interesting things, obviously, from NVIDIA, and I think one of the challenges that we've had is often the machine learning space is quite heavily dominated by NVIDIA. And from a software development perspective, that puts it makes it challenging then to deliver a good experience to everybody. So So if you buy a new Mac, then obviously
exactly. I mean, consider that there are entire ecosystem like the iOS, Mac. They are not using NVIDIA at all, and they are actually looks like they are not going to use anymore Intel at all. So as well in the future. So I don't think hardware is a big like something where we should stick too much. I think it's more the software where I see more like maybe we're gonna see the main company still there for a decade, but hardware I think is still open the conversation.
I think it still comes down to intent as well. So I think the NVIDIA was able to show that like machine learning is achievable at this scale and quality, and the work of AMD and the recent Ryzen stuff is amazing. But also the various, like, we're going back to say like the Google's Coral with the TPUs for doing fast inference, and I think and like other ASICs for assisted hardware, or even FPGAs we're seeing on some of the new Apple hardware. So I think like those sorts of technologies, again, for enabling kind of speed and kind of and this all happened years ago. If you remember, old machines used to have Targa cards for handling Targa images, and they used to be super expensive, and they used to go on fire and things like that. And so we're going back to that, where we have these this customized hardware, and I think it's interesting, but it's driven by, as Marco said, the software, the need, the desire to push things towards that way. But yeah, it's good, and I think the ecosystem all has to play nicely together. And I think Hitesh's point about kind of geopolitical issues can tilt things one way or another. But it'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
Yeah. So guys, I'm gonna take that opportunity to trampoline us to cloud. I know real time's such a great subject. I think we've only really begun to explore how this gets into the hands of folks in the industry using their day-to-day tools. But one of the interesting aspects you guys mentioned was, does the hardware really matter? Has it come full circle? And that's kind of one of the themes with cloud as well, right? We're in this COVID-19 crisis now, where the very slow piecemeal trend of cloud has suddenly taken on a lot more consideration, and there's a lot of speculation about how entrenched that's going to be into our daily lives in the future, and how we're all going to kind of adopt this, and is it going to actually change the way we work? I think there's consideration on two levels. One is it's going to change the way we work in terms of technology, but also in terms of how we relate to one another as creative stakeholders that are now maybe working over a distance and in a different sort of physical configuration than we were before. So that's kind of the heart of the question around cloud is how are we going to see this cloud trend if it becomes a long-term sustainable thing, just how we work. How are we going to apply it, and what things are going to really change? Like what things are really going to break, and what new things that we haven't even thought about that are now possible because we've been sort of forced into this this sort of adoption of a new type of technology.
I think the first point is to or the starting place is really to understand that cloud is not so much about the infrastructure, but it's about a different cost model. And the more you understand about the business implications, the more you realize that it's going to be transformative. And the fact that we've been taken kind of there by gunpoint with this COVID crisis just accelerated that. And the primary way is not just the fact that the infrastructure can exist somewhere else, but the fact that we're stuck, at least for the most part in the services industry, we're stuck in an industry where it's a jobs-based model. You have to plan your resources, you have to put your money in the ground and capital up front, and you have to hire the people in time, and then you get to do the job. But if you have the flexibility to pay per drink, even if you have to pay higher per drink, it makes inherent economic sense to approach things in a more cloud-based way on a per drink basis, and not look at, I think people were beginning to get comfortable with the idea of your back end, your render farm, your servers being out in the cloud, right? But Now we've also comfortably understood that you could even push the workstation in the cloud with some of the stuff that we're doing reasonably well with the PC over IP stuff. And so there's greater confidence to say that nirvana that everybody talks about as a studio in the cloud is not as far-fetched as it once sounded maybe last year. You know, at an NAB, it sounded like, oh, this is good theory. And now we're seeing that some people have been forced kind of close into that, and it can work. It's got a lot of kinks, but it's changed the business model, not just about bits and bytes and the hardware.
What I love about also what cloud has done is it's allowed people to not be concentrated in a city. And I think that's the thing where, you know, I built a very big company previously, and those are all centered in very, very expensive locations around the world. And then those offices were in the most expensive parts of those expensive cities. And I think what cloud has allowed us to do, and I think is demonstrating, is that people can still be very productive and actually happier being able to work remotely and be able to still produce incredible quality. And I think that people have been, you know, my previous company that I helped build, you know, we used to spend an absolute fortune on hardware, physical hardware, air conditioning, power, and all that stuff. This was a constant thing. Every year there was this massive line item. And I used to be like, really? We got to spend that? And I think a lot of that now gets taken off our plate. And what automatically happens is as the virtual workstation specs evolve, because they're evolving on a weekly basis, suddenly there's new kind of machine specs online. Oh, you need a machine with 0.5 terabyte of memory? One's there. You need a machine with, you know, more kind of CPUs? There's one there. There's so many different flavors so that it becomes very, very creative from a technical point of view in terms of how you can set up an infrastructure and use the right tool for the job. So I'm incredibly excited about what's happening with cloud, because obviously I've got a new company now that I've started up, and my ambition, Mathieu knows this, is I'm literally going completely all in, completely 100% cloud-based. And there are some kinks. It isn't complete plain sailing. You know, PCO IP is good, but as with anything, you know, you got to skate to where the puck's going to be, not where the puck is. And I see that over the next 2-3 years, the PCO IP is going to improve. There's going to be competitors to Teradici, home connections, you know, and that's just going to get better and better. So I can't, knowing that I want to build something of scale, I would never build a company of scale again with physical hardware on the ground.
Yeah, that's adding on. Sorry, Itesh, we want to go on.
I was just going to add that one of the other parts that we overlook is we transfer so much data between organizations, between our clients and us and our vendors. You know, we kind of dismiss or have taken that as a fact of life, but as soon as you start placing it into the cloud, you've taken out a pretty large part of your overhead time and, you know, management headache. So if the more that individual companies embrace the cloud, the more we'll be collaborating within the cloud itself with our clients and vendors. So the value chain will become more efficient. You know, if I can get my plates for the VFX at work we're doing directly from the client and they're putting it in the right S3 bucket, it makes life a heck of a lot easier than having to do with IO and Aspera and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's oh, sorry, Marco, do you want to say something? Yeah. I saw that there's a great question in the chat that I'd like to get to, but Marco, go for it.
So, okay. Oh, no, you want to reply a question? No, sorry. No, yeah, exactly. There is actually a question from Jonas about sustainability. This one connect with what Itesh and Angus said. It's cloud is going to help a lot because cloud is made on in terms of sustainability. For example, Google reduce 70% by using machine learning algorithms. Reduces is power demand on the cloud, on their cloud and data center. So it's definitely cloud is going to help a lot because of scalable. All the scalability is completely optimized. I'm pretty happy talking about the PCI or IP is, yeah, Teradici was good, but you need, and our CG artists use so far in this last month, but you need also the connection at home. They're working well. So there is a different stage that they need to work together. So there are big promise of 5G, of course. And 5G should be the last mile for making cloud and this remote working well, because otherwise it's kind of a route that is interrupted at some point. And also I want to highlight one thing, one angle that I love on cloud that I'm particularly happy to work more is the remote rendering. So cloud is basically triggering and opening these big opportunities to rendering everything remotely, so you can watch the final result on any platform. And this one is open, for example, for gaming, first of all, Stadia and all the big game platforms, but also for previewing. So VFX, you are on the street, you are receiving your render, you can watch on your mobile phone and explore with the same quality in terms of pixel that you should have on a workstation. It's something that, of course, is really open and enlarge the opportunities of collaborating between different teams on the VFX industry as well.
Yeah, so I think that's been one of the heroes of this COVID lockdown, of being able to like that, being able to remotely review things across your, any platform or your phone. And I think going back to, I think it's been reiterated a lot of the efficiencies that you get when all your data is one place and you bring the people and the applications to the data instead. But there's a really great question in the chat on, so I'm going to post this out here. Why don't we see cloud computing in large in the VFX industry? So I suppose why hasn't it been adopted so widely across the VFX industry? I think it's, obviously we've seen a lot of companies already adopting it, and Angus, why isn't this why isn't cloud just one of the tools or one of the ways, and what's holding cloud back from being the way that we do this?
I think it's kind of whichever direction you set sail on. The bigger your ship is, the more difficult it is to turn. And I think that specifically with the big famous companies, if they're trying to then suddenly kind of pivot, 1 foot in cloud and 1 foot out of cloud is a messy place to be. It's difficult. And I think there's also constant kind of debate about what is cheaper. If I buy a render farm and I kind of drive it into the ground over the course of 3 years, and I then use spot pricing on Amazon, which is cheaper. So there's those kinds of the debates. It also depends on who you talk to. I think there's been an aversion to going all in on the cloud, but I'm not too sure why. For me, it's apart from the whole of Google going down or the whole of Azure or AWS going down. That's the thing that I worry about. But I can't see any reason not to do it, because it's better for the environment. It's better for sustainability. It's better in my model.
I agree with you, Angus. Data security, for my experience, is still a problem, is still an issue. There are companies, they are not really trust completely how data are transmitted, because you have to if you have a cloud. So even if you have a Microsoft security or Google security, that data, they still need to come to the network in some way. And all these channels need some safety. And still companies go.
Sorry, it seems like it's a combination of the cost for medium to large companies. As you said, if they already have a lot of infrastructure invested in the ground, to make a shift is one thing. But even if you were working on a blank sheet and trying to make a decision between them, it's not a clear-cut decision unless you're really focused just on a project-based stuff. As you were saying, the economics are still a little bit shady. You might still prefer to build in-house, but those will change over time. But I think the other other key ingredient that sort of stalled people from moving en masse to cloud in our industry has been the I/O, right? So if I put all of my key things into the cloud, but my workstations are down, locally, how am I going to constantly go back and forth to capitalize in both parts of the world? But now, if you really put the workstation in the cloud as well, that solves at least that piece of it. Of course, I'm making it sound much more simpler than it is, but at least you have less to be concerned about in that high throughput between workstation and the back-end infrastructure.
Yeah, I think we touched on it slightly earlier in terms of actually just what the artist is seeing, because we're kind of pixel obsessed as an industry, and we're kind of worried about the amount of the dynamic range and resolutions getting bigger, not smaller. It's being able to get an accurate representation of what the output is on your monitor. That's very important. And I feel like that only since Teradici Ultra has actually come about, has there really been something that's kind of like, okay, that's starting to move in the right direction. And that's less than a year old. And it's still very much kind of been updated every few months. So I feel like the trust of what you're looking at is accurate, is important. I also think that security is important, but loads of other industries use the cloud almost exclusively. So it's making sure that there are certifications and there is a comfort level. I know that AWS does offer MPAA certification in certain areas. So
I would say that there are also companies, they then create their own data center just because they don't want to depend anymore.
But in my mind, it's like if the rest of the world, professional businesses can operate in the cloud, specifically banks and that, then surely we can figure out a way to do it. There is a way. There is always a way.
Yeah, I think the security questions. Sorry, go ahead, Matt. Do you?
Oh no, sorry. I was just following the discussion. Actually, I also want to point out we're at the top of the hour, and this is really great. This discussion around cloud has been very vigorous. In fact, all these topics have been just been really great. The take that you guys have, I think, is shed a lot of light on things that I think people in their day-to-day, these are big heady subjects, and we're all really interested in how they're going to play out. And I think one of the things that is really important to us at Foundry, especially in Dan and I's wheelhouse around research, is we have a really firm commitment to advancing not just the state of the art for all of these areas, but also finding tangible ways of getting into the hands of folks like Hitesh, Marco, and Angus. And I think that's the really tricky bit. Kind of science exercises are very good, and they do help move the state of the art as well. But I think Foundry's in this very interesting position where we have both contact with academia and the sort of the cutting edge state of the art at a research level, but also in the application, which really comes from you guys. And we have a really firm commitment around getting more of the greatness that we see on paper or in YouTube videos of real time, and really bringing that into things that folks who use Foundry products or use our things can actually use and deploy and use on a day-to-day basis. Same with cloud, making cloud more friendly, more accessible to people, and making machine learning something that can actually be useful and accelerate people's creative process. Everything used to be done by hand. This is a great panel. We've all had a long history in the industry, so we all remember when things were awful and all had to be done, bit by bit. And I think we're moving to a world where we can just continue to build on top of layer after layer. And I think ML is one of those technologies that is helping us to sit on the shoulders of a technology giant like AI. So I think what we can have a look at the question. I think we've done a really good job, honestly, of going through the the questions in the Q&A. If nothing else comes in, I think we could proceed to wrapping up. I'm just going to check for the go ahead here. Looking good. All right. I just want to give a huge thank you to my panelists. Angus, thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Hitesh. Thank you, Marcos. You guys have been really great. I know we've worked with all three of you guys in different capacities, and it's just a really great pleasure to bring you guys onto this platform and give everyone the opportunity to interact with you and ask questions and to hear your responses. We look forward to doing something like this again in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
It's been a great panel. I mean, I'm sure we really probably could talk for several more hours. Hitesh, I loved your take on the artist workflows for ML and how that ties in. Marco and Angus, ideas on like real time, like the feeling of transformative workflows for real time really resonated. And then the insights in the cloud from both the security perspectives and like the cost of like Hitesh framing it as like it being a cost model challenge, like some very, very nice insights here. So thank you all very much for sharing your brains with us tonight. And also thank everybody at home or at work who's been following along, and also everybody who's been asking questions. So feel free, if there's anything else that you need answered, please get in touch as well.
Thank you, everyone.